FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome, and you are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's July 2nd, 2018. Hey, first, as always, we urge you to be part of the show. After a long weekend, first thing in the morning, I go down, get a cup of coffee at a certain unnamed place that recognizes about 85 different genders as legitimate, and that you're allowed to loiter there, do drugs, use the bathrooms, use their internet with no obligation to purchase, which is a great thing. In any event, while I'm there, reading your emails is a lot of fun. So KL@KerryLutz is the email address for your attention. So can the swamp be drained? Can it be done by Trump? Will it be done? Is it being done? All good questions, all legitimate. Person you're about to hear from has written a book, Operation Drain the Swamp. His name is Adam Andrzejewski. You've written this book. We're really thrilled to have you on the show.
Super. Well, I'm happy to be on the show. Thank you very much for your interest in our work.
All right. So I always say, rather than draining the swamp should be dredged so we could have a nice place where people can ride their boats and not have to worry about their props getting stuck in the muck on the bottom or getting pulled down by a swamp creature, whatever. But how do you define the swamp here, Adam?
So we've defined the swamp as the federal bureaucracy and what they spend. So obviously, if there's other elements to the D.C. swamp, this is how we defined it. We wrote this book, Operation Drain the Swamp. Everyone can get a copy at Amazon. And what we do is we quantify the federal bureaucracy, first of all, and then what they spend. So there's 2 million federal bureaucrats that we gave oversight to the last year of the Obama administration, the swamp that Trump inherited, and they're expensive. It's $1.1 million a minute just on salaries and bonuses, and it's $500 million a day. We identified 30,000 federal bureaucrats that out-earn every governor of the 50 states, and that threshold salary is $190,000 per year. In 78 large federal agencies, the average pay now exceeds 6 figures, $100,000 a year.
Well, I always had this idea, the way that you get rid of all of these people who don't do anything is the next snow day that they have in Washington, D.C., or next bad weather day, and then they say all non-essential government employees don't come into work. So they get all those people to not come into work, and then next day Trump says, all right, you're non-essential, we don't need you, you produce nothing, you're all fired. And we could probably reduce the federal headcount, I'll bet you by 75, 80%, because look, Adam, you're running your own business. You're a small businessman. You can't afford to have non-essential employees. In fact, most small business employers out there don't even know what a non-essential employee is, and yet our government seems to have a majority of them.
Well, if you think about, Reagan in 83, they did the Grace Commission, I think, starting in 82, and the Grace Commission said that 1/3 of all federal spending was waste, duplication, unnecessary. Nobody believes the situation's gotten better. We, on Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, the president released his mandated White House salary report to Congress. We immediately grabbed it, did oversight. I've got a piece up at Forbes right now. It's on White House payroll at Forbes. You can Google it. And the president's headcount versus the Obama administration at the same point in their respective presidencies, Trump's payroll count is down 20%. Over at the Department of Education under Betsy DeVos, she's cut 20% of her payroll. You could probably cut 20% of all the executive agencies across the board. It'd be about 300,000 federal bureaucrats, and it would save the American taxpayer hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hey, and I've got a great job for those 300,000 people who would be eliminated. Turn them into taxi drivers in self-driving autonomous taxis. All right, because it's about as useful as the job they're doing now, right? I mean, what else are we going to do with them?
Here's the problem. They would be upset because we write about this in the book, the average bureaucrat gets 43 days of paid time off, which is 10 holidays, 13 sick days, and 20 vacation days. And so if they were all turned into cab drivers, they wouldn't get that perk.
Yeah. Well, the thing is also, most of those are not use it or lose it. So they accrue them, as they do in many state and local governments. So the last year, they basically never have to come into the office. If you look at that guy, Andy McCabe, who was the deputy director of the FBI and then became acting director after Comey was fired, the guy served his notice of resignation, and he didn't come in for like 4 months because he had all this accrued vacation and sick time. And what about having use it or lose it for these guys as well?
All of it's got to be on the table. We estimated the paid time off benefit to be at taxpayer cost of $23 billion a year. Just that one benefit alone. We're not talking about the excessive salaries. We're not talking about the bonuses that they get on top of their excessive salaries, but just the paid time off piece. $23 billion American taxpayer cost every year.
Madness. What about the senior executive service? Did you do any work on that?
So the senior executive service, that doesn't, if it was part of the federal executive bureaucracy, we gave it oversight. I'm not remembering that agency specifically.
Okay, it's actually, it goes across all agencies, and the theory...
Oh, it's the pay grade, yeah.
Yeah, the theory is that they can be paid anything. And for some, it's fair because, look, you want a guy in the FDA who's a doctor. He's probably not going to work for $120,000 when he can be working for many times that in the private sector. So you probably got to pay that guy $500,000, right? But then there are other jobs that are totally beyond the pale, that these people would not be doing anything other than working for the government. Like Mueller supposedly is part of that senior executive service. Same with McCabe. Same with so many of these people that you hear about in the news who've perpetrated allegedly great acts of corruption.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of abuse in the system. We highlighted the bonuses at a very small agency that most people have never heard of. They're not curing cancer. They're not sending a man to the moon. They are a land management agency based in San Francisco, California, on a former military base. So it's called the Presidio Trust. And in the past 3 fiscal years, there's 2 million salaries and bonuses that we reviewed. And 6 out of the top 10 highest bonuses in the entire federal system went to employees of this Presidio Trust. Their human resource manager, he's the guy that, in part, his job description, he cuts the payroll. Well, he received a payroll check for $141,000 of bonus.
Oh, my God.
He was the number 1 bonus in the federal system in fiscal year 2016, the HR manager.
That's madness, isn't it?
One of their program managers got $82,000 of bonus. A realtor got $75,000 a bonus. This is some of the abuse that's just baked into the system as business as usual.
They're having a veritable orgy, financial orgy, at taxpayer expense. So what do you think Trump is going to do about this? And this is obviously one of the reasons why he's getting so much opposition from all quarters, because politicians love to hook up their supporters, relatives, contributors, etc., with these high-paying, limited utility government jobs, right? They're a major
That's
plum.
True. So our report, Mapping the Swamp, went to the Executive Office of President, Office of Management and Budget. It went to the highest level executives, the people that also put together the president's budget. And I've been told that in the president's 2019 presidential budget, as he submits it to Congress, he's going to have cuts in the paid time off provisions. So right now, as we've been talking about, it's 43 days. This isn't France. That needs to be scaled back, and the president's going to do it.
The horror, if you're a bureaucrat actually being expected to work as many hours as somebody in the private sector. I mean, the madness. It's got to stop here, Adam. I mean, really, this is terrible. This is an awful time to
on this for a couple of months, and I ask everybody in the audience to raise their hand if they get 43 days of paid time off, and not one single person has ever raised their hand.
Gee, it's a tough time to be a government worker. I mean, I think the term government worker is usually an oxymoron in itself, because you go to the government, many of them, so they don't have to work. I call it the I-95 rule. 5% of the government workers produce 95% of the work. And in the private sector, Parato's rule applies, and it's 20% do 80% of the work. So you could see how much worse off the government is than the private sector.
Absolutely. But, it's not only about excessive compensation. We identified 120,000 federal bureaucrats that run these federal grant programs. And in every single year, their real power comes from being able to distribute. And this drives people absolutely crazy. It's an unfathomable amount of money, $600 billion on federal grant making. And so we found, Kerry, that there's a grant for everybody. If you're a senior citizen and if you want to learn how to do Tai Chi in your senior center, the American taxpayer funded a $700,000 grant for a senior center in Boston, Massachusetts, so the elderly could learn Tai Chi. If you are a child in China, and if you want to learn how to cross your busy street, the American taxpayer funded a $200,000 grant to create a virtual reality platform to teach children in China how to cross their streets. And if you're a prostitute in California, the American taxpayer put $1.5 million into an education program to teach sex ed to California prostitutes who could probably teach the class.
Yeah, I'd say they're probably darn close to PhDs in the topic if they've been on the job any amount of time. Do you remember that guy who used to be on TV, Andrew Lesko, on getting government grants, loans, and free money? And he was an encyclopedia. Obviously, you couldn't get money from all of them, but there were so many of them that you could get that it was absurd. And his website was gofreegovernmentmoney.com. And, this is actually Lesko.com, Lesko.com. And he would just go on, like he'd be on a Tonight Show, and they could just sit back for like a half hour while he just recited all of this free money that was out there for you. But what about corporate welfare? Look, we pay out like $650 billion a year in corporate welfare to wealthy corporations that don't need it, that are just robbing the public fisc.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, Kerry, because, we talk about these halo examples, and there's a lot of them, but our most successful companies in the country, the Fortune 100, they are on the taxpayer subsidy dole. So over the course of the last 3 years, we identified $3.3 billion of federal giveaways, grants, and subsidies into our Fortune 100 companies. It's outrageous. So they're dialed in. They are dialed in to middle and working class taxpayers' wallets to the tune of $3.3 billion. They can't make the claim they need the money. Mm-hmm. They don't. They got plenty of money, and they don't need taxpayer help.
Definitely not. One of the things, and Trump talked about this right after he was elected with Air Force One, he said to Boeing, hey, we don't need to pay $400 million per plane. And then he went to Lockheed about the F-35 and said, guys, you're being pigs here. You got to cut the price, which they did. How much is debatable. But, just when you build a home or you have work done in your house and then you change something, like you say, I want the dishwasher. I don't want it on that side of the room. I want it on the other side. And that requires a change order. and it costs a ridiculous amount of money. And that's what these government contractors do. That's why government contracting is a license to steal, because they'll lowball the initial contract and then they clean up on the extras, on the change orders, and they effectively rob the taxpayer and line the pockets of management and, to a lesser extent, the shareholders.
Absolutely. And then there's all kinds of welfare for the elites in the system. In our book, Drain the Swamp, and everyone listening to your program can buy it at Amazon, we detail out the $42 billion of taxpayer direct federal payments, taxpayer subsidies, to the Ivy League colleges, to the 8 colleges of the Ivy League over the course of the last 6 years. If you add up the special tax treatment of their endowments, the taxpayer subsidies, and direct payments, it's $42 billion. And again, they can't argue that they need the money, but they want the money. They're dialed into the money, and there's no public purpose for working and middle-class taxpayers to fund Ivy League colleges.
Yeah, well, we have so many examples of it. Even if we cut it down like 20 or 30%, the effects would be amazing, and we'd see the deficit start to go down. Get rid of a third or half of those useless public servants, in quotes. Cut down the corporate welfare.
The system's been gamed. And, if you were a supporter of Bernie Sanders on the center left or of Donald Trump on the center right in the last election, they both made the argument that the elites have gamed the system for personal gain. And what we've done in our book is actually show people just how bad it is. I mean, for instance, Kerry, I'm sure you recently flew your private plane over the shishi little airport over at Martha's Vineyard for your vacation.
All the time.
Taxpayers put $9.2 million into that little airport.
Yeah, well, we needed that. So there was what about these loan programs? The government as a lender is a horrible job. I mean, subsidizing everybody in the process and taking very little care to see that the money that they're guaranteeing or actually lending out is going to be repaid. They just don't seem bothered. They can't be bothered with that minor detail of, well, are we ever going to get paid back? And you've got like trillions of dollars worth of loans and loan guarantees that they don't even know what it's worth or anything else. Housing guarantees, you got college student loan guarantees. I mean, what haven't they guaranteed?
Yeah, exactly. And then a lot of these loans that they have guaranteed that the American taxpayer is holding the bag on, we didn't need to be making these loans. I want to detail out some examples for you. So we write about the Small Business Administration, the SBA. Those are the folks that are supposed to be lending to mom and pop businesses on Main Street, men and women that have great ideas but can't find financing in the private marketplace.
Right. That's
the express goal of the SBA. But we found $200 million of lending backed by the American taxpayer, low-interest loans, went to private country clubs, golf clubs, swim clubs, beach clubs, and tennis clubs across America. And then we found $9.4 billion didn't go to Main Street. It went to Wall Street with no transparency thereafter.
Goodness gracious. Yeah, it's rather shocking, the creative ways in which they waste our money and the money gets stolen and squandered. And so can Trump really do anything about this?
So he can. I think, the president has led on this issue. His budgets to Congress have been budgets where he has cut spending. He's made the argument that, even small programs like the National Endowment of the Arts should go away. So this was a big debate. The Republicans in Congress have greenlit 2 budgets where they give more money than ever before to the National Endowment of the Arts, and the president wants to cut it entirely. So we decided to fact-check the political promise of the NEA. They say that art in America will go away because they fund the starving artist. Mm-hmm. And so we took a look at their $400 million worth of grants, and it went to 2,400 nonprofit organizations, and 8 out of every $10 funded an arts organization with assets of more than $1 million. And the $120 million went to organizations with assets of more than $1 billion. And one of those organizations was the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. And they got $4 billion worth of assets. And during the Obama years, they scooped up $1.2 million in subsidies, in grants from the American taxpayer.
Unbelievable. So you think, but Congress doesn't want to change this, right? Congress just wants this to keep going on because that's how they get campaign contributions and that's how they get elected.
Well, and our honorary chairman is the former legendary United States Senator from Oklahoma, Dr. Tom Coburn. And Coburn writes about this and frequently talks about this, that there is no constituency for spending cuts in Congress because these people, it's all about careerism. It's all about getting reelected. And as soon as you start to cut spending, these Republican congressmen think they won't get reelected.
And they might not, right? You think they're going to get reelected?
Well, we have to make it a voting issue that they have greenlit so much spending, so much waste, so much mismanagement of our money. It's our money, and there has to be a transparency revolution.
Yeah, I totally agree with you 100%. And if anyone's the one to do it, it's going to be Trump, right?
Well, I agree. I don't see any other bold leader on Capitol Hill or Washington, D.C. The president is certainly leading on these issues.
Hey, and what about when they do try to cut something, then everyone comes out of the woodwork? How can you possibly, if you're a thinking human being, believe that any agency is spending the money wisely and efficiently? I mean, how can anyone believe that?
Well, and I think the public opinion polls, look, I'm from Illinois. It is the Super Bowl of corruption. In the Illinois public opinion polls, it's a 95% issue that when state or local government spends a dollar, 95% of the people believe that corruption in some form or another is involved. And I bet you if we did a nationwide survey, it'd be 70-80% of the people see it the way we do. So there is definitely the Trump phenomenon in 2016, in part, is on this issue. People fundamentally know. They may not know how bad it is. That's the purpose of our book, Operation Drain the Swamp. But people fundamentally know the system has been gamed, and we're paying for it.
Yes, we are certainly paying for it. Hey, you know the definition of an honest judge in Chicago?
I've never heard this one.
He's one who's fixed and stays fixed.
That is actually probably a true statement.
Oh, I know it for a fact. It's a true statement. Trust me on that. I won't get into it, but I've had personal experience with this, and it's absolutely true. And it's shocking, but it's so on the money, if you will. And everything's for sale in Washington and in all of these state capitals.
Well, and that's why we feel fundamentally that transparency is the revolution that will change United States public policy and politics. If you can see everything, the flow of funds in real time with eyeball scrutiny and oversight, you can hold the political class accountable for tax and spend decisions. And we've had success at Open the Books doing that, whether it's been large federal agencies like Veterans Affairs. We found $20 million spent on a high-end luxury art portfolio during a period where 1,000 veterans died because they couldn't get in to see a doctor.
Oh, it's disgusting.
And we got those rules changed on luxury art purchases. So it can be done, but it's going to take a million eyes on spending at every level to do it.
Well, I'm all for it. So besides getting your book, how do we start to holding them accountable?
Well, come to openthebooks.com, and there's a big graphic in the middle of the homepage. Where's the pork? We've taken that file of $600 billion worth of federal grants, and we show it to you in your own zip code or any zip code across the country. So you can see who's getting what from what federal agency for how much. And then call your member of Congress and ask them what they're doing to stop these things. They can take an amendment to the floor to stop these grants. And in the absence of that, we need to hold them accountable.
Yeah. So is there any legislator out there now who's really trying to make a difference, trying to stop this practice?
I think there's three of them we've had good experience with. They're really fighting for our issues of transparency and accountability. And it's Ron DeSantis in Florida.
Who's running for governor. Yes.
He wrote a big piece of legislation that we helped put together on making federal pension payouts transparent. We looked for 3 years for a member of Congress to sponsor this thing. DeSantis was the only one that ever put his name forward. It was great leadership. It's a great bill. Incredibly, any federal worker, including U.S. senators and congressmen, when they go to retired, it's private information under current law. We, the people who fund it, have no ability to see their pensions. And this legislation would open the pensions up for the first time ever. So DeSantis has been great. Mark Meadows has been great on our issues, and Jim Jordan as well. These
are Freedom Caucus guys, right?
They are. They also sit on U.S. House Oversight and Government Reform. And and that's where, when we're called to D.C. to privately brief that committee, these guys pay attention and carry forward our stuff.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it's really disgusting. If you care anything about the future of the country, this is something that really you need to be concerned about. Again, be part of the show. Write us an email, kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feeds @KerryLutz. The Facebook page is Financial Survival Network. Adam, what's the website we find you at?
It's openthebooks.com.
Openthebooks.com. We'll have a link to that site in the show notes of this interview. Really appreciate you coming on the show, and we will wish you the best of luck with this book. It seems like it should be must reading everywhere, but I don't know who reads books anymore. Hopefully there's an audio book. And hey, we'll check out the book and we'll have you back on.
Kerry, thank you so much for your interest in our work. I look forward to coming back.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.